On today's show, Patrick Beverley was traded to the Lakers. So who else can the Mavs target next? And what could Christian Wood's roles be next season? We'll talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Hey, Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good!
And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. But the best way you can help us grow the show is to comment anything below. Let us know. What do you think Christian Wood's role is next season? I feel like some people are split on it, including maybe the two people on this show. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then we'll get into some rebounding. I pulled some numbers. And we'll talk about the rebounding on this team. If the Mavericks improve enough as far as rebounding, how much will that help them? We'll talk about that. And then we'll get into some news, Patrick Beverley and all that. And joining me, as always, my co-host, writer, and contributor at Mavs.com, the trade titan, the one we're thinking. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
All right, so I had first T-ball practice for
you.
For my son. Yeah, for me.
Did you get it off the team?
Yeah, they didn't check my birth certificate, but... My son's first T-ball practice the other day, and it's his first organized sporting thing ever. He's 4, and I was weirdly too hyped up for I was genuinely excited. It was so hot.
Did you come wearing the baseball pants and everything? You're like the dad that
my son did though, and all the other kids out there were in shorts, and here comes my son rolling up in his pants, belt. He wouldn't take his batting helmet off. And I'm like,
of course not. It's like a space helmet.
Oh my gosh. And I'm like, Rome, bro, you can't go out on the field with the helmet on. But anyway, I don't know what type of sports dad should I be though.
Ooh,
that's the thing.
Yeah, you have to make this decision now.
And I don't know when to step in. He was going after every ball and getting every ball, and I was proud of him. But he wasn't letting the other kids get the ball to throw it the first.
Screw the other kids. Get them out of here.
I know. I'm like, do I step in and be like, Rome, let the kids? But
no, this is his time to develop and be better than everybody else.
Okay. So anyway, it was a good day. He's a good thrower. Got to work on some things, but
he has good days. In the backyard. He has overthrown me a couple times, and I am 6'3" with a long wingspan, and he has overthrown me, which is hard to do.
I did pull out my phone to take a few pictures, and then I looked over, and this mom had a straight up Canon with this huge lens on it, and I'm like, oh, I guess I need to step up my game.
I have to borrow a couple of lenses.
It's good though. It's fun. They're probably gonna be better than the Rangers, so it'll be good.
All right. Patrick Beverley was traded to the Lakers from the Utah Jazz. I mentioned it on Friday's show. I went over why Spencer Dinwiddie is the most important non-superstar, non-star player in the NBA next year. And we talked about Patrick Beverley because I think he's the Lakers' most important non-star player on their team now that they've traded for him. But Patrick Beverley was a player we talked about a lot as a guy that could be a Mavericks target. That if the Mavs wanted another guard, guy that can maybe handle the ball a little bit, can shoot the three, can defend, if they wanted to bolster that depth a little bit, he could have been the guy that could have been a pretty easy trade. Dwight Powell, maybe Josh Green, something else. And the Taylor Horton-Tucker, Stanley Johnson trade kind of threw me off because they didn't even get a pick for him or anything.
I mean, the stock of Taylor Horton-Tucker
has fallen.
This guy went from
it has tailened off. That is
somebody shared the article. I don't know who wrote it, but it was somebody who wrote an article back a while ago. I don't know, basically saying I don't know if the Lakers would give up Horton-Tucker for Damian Lillard in a package for him, and I was just dying laughing. And I'm
when that actually happened with Kyle Lowry. That's real.
When that trade came across my phone, I was like, wow, his value really did suck. But then I thought about it from I thought it was a great move for Utah. It's hey, swap out,
take a flyer on him.
Yeah, take a flyer on him. You're gonna suck. So and for Dallas, it's oh, all right. It's kind of a bummer because that was the clean cut trade that shouldn't cost a ton, but probably don't have to give up a first and all of that. Who has more value right now, Horton Tucker or Josh Green?
Man, well, Taylor Horton Tucker had been signed for a couple years, so he had a little bit more money and years on his deal.
Yeah,
I don't know. They're probably the same.
Because I was like trying to compare it a little bit. I was like, all right, Dwight and Josh Green, Stanley Johnson, Taylor Horton Tucker. What
would you rather?
What's
have?
what's the biggest difference in that? And I'm not saying that was on the deal for, or on the table for Dallas, but yeah, it's kind of a bummer. I mean, now we can just really root against him, which is a lot of fun, and see Luka just absolutely destroy him on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
So, which will be a Christmas gift for all of us. But it was fun while it lasted, entertaining it.
It was. And so now that one's done. Does that change anything about what you think about the Lakers? Not like as an organization, but as the team next year on the court.
I was going to say, I still hate them.
I was going to say.
Probably hate them even more.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. I mean, yeah, we got to see what they turn the Russ to first into. If they turn that into like a couple quality guys, like, okay, like you're a playoff team probably.
But for right now, yeah, the Patrick Beverley thing is like stopping the bleeding, basically. Is what they're doing.
No.
So for the Mavericks, though, Patrick Beverley was somebody that we had talked about a lot as a target. So who are some other players now? Who are the players left on the board, I guess, that the Mavericks could still target?
Yeah, I think it still stays in Utah. I mean, I feel like, it was Windhorst, McMahon, I guess Bontemps the other day on Windhorst's pod talking about, just kind of like deadline for Mitchell, how they think Mitchell's probably going to be traded before the trading or the training camp. And, if this Beverly trade was like kind of the first trade of them kind of sending off their vets and stuff, I think you have to stay in Utah if you're Dallas. And you're looking at Jordan Clarkson, you're looking at Mike Conley. And, the packages would have to look a little bit different because the money, Conley makes over 20 million. Clarkson makes around 13. Clarkson's the better player. Conley's the better, traditional point guard, playmaker, set up the offense type guy, obviously older. So I'm curious to see how hard Dallas will go after Jordan Clarkson. Like that's the guy that I'm looking at for Dallas. That, let me ask you this. Would you give up a first for Clarkson?
No.
Interesting. If it was Dwight Powell, Josh Green, and a lottery protected first round pick.
Just for Clarkson?
Just for Jordan Clarkson.
No, I'm not doing that. I'm doing the "we have Jordan Clarkson at home" meme, and it's Tim Hardaway Jr. Like we have that guy. There's a lot of talk about Jordan Clarkson versus Tim Hardaway Jr. on Twitter over this past weekend, basically on Mavs Twitter. And what I put my input in on the difference between those two guys. The only difference is that Clarkson has a lot more pull-up game. He can get his own shot a little bit better.
He can create. Yeah.
He can create a little bit better, but only for himself. He can
get to the basket.
He can get to the basket. He can pull up and create shots for himself. Tim Hardaway Jr. is more of like a create off of other passes and things like that. And Clarkson's making less money. True. That also has to be considered in it. But I'd rather just keep Tim Hardaway Jr., keep the first, because all these guys, like you start looking through them, like I don't know if there's many guys like that are just a role player that I would want to send a first out, because the Mavericks need to load up on those first in order to trade for a star. Like that's still their main problem on this, and we keep coming back to it because it's so true. Like don't just dink and dunk all these little first like around for these random guys. Like even some people saying like, oh, they need to go get Colin Sexton, like go get like send a couple firsts over there. Okay, well then you don't have two firsts that you need to send in a star trade if you can possibly do one this year or next year, and that you have a window. Like your window is closing to make that trade.
Guys, the Colin Sexton stuff is like so complicated to pull off. Like I'm not even,
it's too hard.
When I see somebody throw that out as a rumor, I'm like, I just don't even like think about it. Watch them like pull this off and I look dumb. But like
I would like to look dumb.
There's so many layers to it, from sign and trade, hard cap, all this different stuff, that it's kind of impossible, but not impossible because it's NBA. I think so. You're telling me, okay, would it change your ceiling for the Mavs if they got Jordan Clarkson for that package? For basically like nothing. With
a first, or just with the
first, with Dwight, Josh, and a first, and you're adding Jordan Clarkson to the bench with Tim and Christian Wood and Maxey.
I just don't know if it solves the whole problem. Like, I don't know if it solves enough of a problem to me to give up a first. Clarkson would be good. He would add some scoring off the bench for sure. But right now they have Tim and Christian Wood coming off the bench as scorers, and you don't add a playmaker. He's a shot creator, but not a playmaker.
Okay.
I don't know if it's enough for me to give up like a real.
I'm torn on it because I think he would raise the ceiling. I think his creation, because like Tim's not a creator. No. Like you're not gonna give the ball to Tim and say, "Hey, go get a bucket."
You can run plays for Tim, but you got to create those, right?
Yeah. And Jordan Clarkson would relieve Dinwiddie and Luka as far as like handling the ball. I think it would raise the ceiling for the Mavs. Like if they went out and got Jordan Clarkson for that deal, I think I would say, write me in for a top 4 team in the West.
That's the difference.
I think so.
Just adding that one guy, just adding Jordan Clarkson, even no
because
matter
I
what
think
he looked like in the playoffs.
I think you have one of the best benches in like you're gonna have those 3 guys coming off the bench, Clarkson, Tim, and Christian Wood with Maxey as a stretch 4, stretch 5. Like that's now you have a rotation. Like you're talking Dinwiddie, Luka, Reggie, Dorian, JaVale.
You got a bunch of dudes.
You have a solid 8-man rotation at that point. Maxey making a 9-man rotation. So now obviously you got to make the pieces fit and stuff. But who knows? Like maybe you make that trade and you try to trade Tim later on for a better piece. But I think Clarkson would fit well, and I think he would be good on this team.
Coming up, I want to talk about this a little bit more because it sounds like we're on different sides of this. And so let's talk about the possibility. Clarkson. We mentioned Conley a little bit, then Bogdanovic, and then we'll get into Christian Wood and what his role could be coming off the bench for the Mavs. So we'll talk about that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you that hold on. Open. All right. Are you one of those people that thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst that could happen? You end up driving below the speed limit. It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is your reaction time is way slowed down when we're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, you'll get a DUI. All right, Isaac Harris, let's talk a little bit more about this Jordan Clarkson thing, because I think that we're on opposite ends of this. You're super high on adding Jordan Clarkson, and I think they have scoring off the bench. They don't have creation off the bench, but just that shot creation is enough for you to even vault the Mavericks to the next level of where you expect them to be next season.
I just don't like. What's the other options? Like if you're stacking this up against something else, and you're saying, I'm in the camp that you have to go for it with Luka Doncic. Like yep. you have to. Yep. But I'm also in the camp that I'm going to contradict myself that your main goal right now should be to go get the number 2 guy.
Yeah.
And in order to get the number 2 guy, you got to have your first round picks and all that stuff. So for you, would you prefer Mike Conley as a Jazz target now?
So here's the thing. So Clarkson,
you're not giving up a first for Conley.
No. Clarkson is $13.3 million this upcoming season, $14 million player option second year. Conley is $22.7 million this season, so about $9 million more than Clarkson, but a non-guaranteed $24 million in the second year. So you can make some stuff work out, and you're not losing as much. I think I would rather have Conley's skill set. I would need to check to see if he's as washed as he looked in the playoffs, because, man, that was brutal. But I think I would rather have his skill set than have Clarkson's at this point on the team if I'm just picking one for one. Although Clarkson did average 17 points a game the last 3 years in the playoffs.
Get buckets, yeah.
24 games in the playoffs for the Jazz over the last 3 years, and he averaged 17.3 points, shot 35% from 3 on 7 threes, and those are all threes that he's like making himself and all that. So you are adding a good player, and you're adding something the Mavericks don't necessarily have in that skill set.
The thing with Utah when it comes to Mike Conley, I've seen some Mavs fans be like, man, we got to go get Mike Conley. All right, Bertans and it's like, all right, listen.
They're not taking on that money.
Utah doesn't want to take on money. So why did you got to always ask yourself the question, like, why would Utah do this deal?
Or if they do take on money, you have to give them more stuff, right? It's the Porzingis deal. The Porzingis deal was, all right, you're taking on this. We'll take on Tim. We'll take on Christian or Courtney Lee. It's like, okay, well, if you're gonna do that, then you have to take on more stuff. So you have to give them more things to take on that money.
Exactly. So that's the thing with Mike Conley, to where if it's like bad contracts, you probably attach in a first. Then at that point, so if you don't want to do that, can you scrounge up enough, expiring contracts to where it'd be like, hey, you can get off, the next year of Mike Conley if you're Utah, if it's like Dwight and Maxey or something like that. And man, I just don't know if I'm going to give up Maxey for Mike Conley, basically. So we've talked about some other names when it comes to like point guards that, I'm watching. Derrick Rose, what happens with, New York and Utah with Donovan Mitchell. If Rose is in that deal, does Dallas hop in and try to get Derrick Rose as a third team? We've talked about Kobe White. I don't know how much of a difference maker he makes. I don't know how what the cost would be to go get him.
He's definitely cheaper. He's definitely cheaper than any of these other ones for sure.
He's young. I don't know how much you're trusting him, like in a playoff type of thing.
No, you're taking a risk on him, a little flyer.
Obviously, if you could get Alex Caruso, I would definitely try to go get him. But
also, Kobe White would follow the 6'5" and above rule that the Mavs seem to have right now.
That's true. Would you have any interest in Devontae Graham?
I thought about him when I started looking through guys today, and like, kind of, but I think so. He stepped in and played. He just didn't play a lot in the playoffs for them. Like he became nothing for them. Like he stepped into this Pelicans team and was supposed to be like this guy off the bench or even the starter. Like he started 63 games for them this year, and he was supposed to be like, oh, he's gonna jump to this next level because he's not in the shadow of all the Hornets like guards and shooters, and then all of a sudden he just like totally vanished.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way as you.
But maybe you get him cheaper because of that.
That's true. It's true. Would you call Charlotte and say, is there any type of bigger deal we could do with you guys?
Boy?
I mean, I'm always going to try to get scary Terry. A bigger deal with Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier.
Both of them.
Yeah. And it's like a bigger deal of like Tim, Dwight. Here's my thing. Would you give up Christian Wood in a deal to get Rozier and Gordon Hayward? Because I only say that because the appeal to Charlotte would be to get off long-term money. And if you have Christian Wood and Dwight Powell in that deal, that's expiring $24 million. You add Tim to that's another 20. You're getting close at that point to where basically they would get off the second year of Gordon Hayward.
We've been talking about this Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier type deal for a while. Also, Rozier has 4 more years left on his deal.
Don't care. Sign me up.
I was gonna say you're all in on it. Terry Rozier would solve a lot of problems. Gordon Hayward, if healthy, would also solve a lot of problems. Like those are two guys I think that would solve a little bit more than the guys that we're talking about now. I guess Terry Rozier's a little closer to Clarkson, like what Clarkson does.
Yeah.
As far as a shooter, get buckets, but Gordon Hayward can play make for sure, and so you're definitely adding like another playmaker type guy. It's just there's just so many ifs with him. Like, are we really doing another? Like, okay, if only he's not injured.
That one's a little too rich for
There's
that's
so much money. That's
big.
$51 million. You have to match up.
Yeah, that's why I'll just circle back to Clarkson. I think it's Clarkson. I think it's possibly Mike Conley, Derrick Rose. It's one of those 3 dudes that I'm watching the most right now.
I mean, we also talked about a deal. The only deal I think recently that both you and I agreed with is the Westbrook deal.
Oof. I don't know what to think of that situation.
But our Westbrook deal was not to have him play. But I was listening to, I think it was Bill Simmons and Waz and Rob Mahoney. And they were talking about who's even going to take Westbrook? Who would even take him? And they were like, there's no team out there that has a role for him and a setup that would make sense for Westbrook. And you know what? I just started thinking. I was like, all right, if there's a team that definitely has a role for him, like his skill set, the Mavericks do have a role for him. Come on, if you can convince him, come off the bench and all that. And then, okay, it would be such a heat check for Jason Kidd. All right, first year, feeling good about ourselves. Our culture,
he would 100% walk in with the hat backwards, the flat bill Rangers hat backwards.
Our two words last year were chemistry and accountability, and we think we can like literally like Russell Westbrook is antithetical of both of those words right now in the NBA. But I think Jason Kidd would come in and be like, "All right, so I did this. What you're going through right now, I did this in my career. I was a player that did all these things throughout my career, was so successful. I went to the finals. You went to the finals. I was, close to MVP. You won an MVP. There's all these different things he could talk about. And then I started getting older in my career, and I had to change my game.
And then
I don't know if Frank Vogel could have that conversation, but I think Jason Kidd thinks he might be able to have that conversation. So you start talking about it. The Mavs have said no to anything about Westbrook so far, and even publicly had said a hell no through Tim McMahon. But it's just one of those where you think, is there any team that would have any role for him? And you're like, well, if you squint real hard, the Mavs have one.
And then Kidd looks at him and says, "Why not?"
That's the end of his whole speech. He goes through the whole speech. You play the Game of Thrones music in the back of it, and he's like, "Why not?" Dun, 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 dun. No, we're done with that. We're done with that. But those are some of the other options for the Mavericks. You never mentioned Bogdanovich.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great. I think they're still focusing on a guard, and that's why I'd stick to the other guys probably. But I think it would be great in Dallas, and yeah. Also think he's the best player out of all those.
Agreed.
And I think he's going to get a first, and I would assume Dallas is trying to make this deal without giving up a first.
Okay, you doing a first for Clarkson or Bogdanovich, or would you do one? Or would you do it for both?
I think I would do it for both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not at the same time. I'm just talking about either or type deal.
Yeah. I mean, obviously some protections and stuff on that. You're trying to ride this thin line right now of you got to show Luka that we're competing every year.
Yeah.
But also preparing for that next big trade for the second star.
Yeah. Tyler Dorsey's success with the Greek national team isn't making you feel any better?
He's probably more like a third or fourth guy in the rotation.
The other thing is he's not a playmaker either, right? So even if he comes in and you're like, oh, he's grown so much since he's been in the NBA, he's a viable player.
No, stop. We're not trying to have realistic. I'm not trying to have realistic expectations for a two-way. I'm not doing that.
All right, coming up, let's talk about Christian Wood a little bit, because you and I both disagree, I think, on what Christian Wood's role could be next year, or at least the different ends of it. So we'll talk about that coming up. All right, Isaac. I think I said all right, Isaac, in a Locked On NBA episode last week to Pat. It's just something about hitting the button to come, the bumper to come back. It's just something about that sound that hits it with me. I was answering listener questions on Friday when you were out, because I was staying out too late.
God.
And one of the questions from
my first beer
from I was with my friends with their two little kids, and no. I was with so Somesh asked this question: what will Christian Wood's role be next year? That's his biggest question going into the season next year. And I was like, all right, let's tackle some of these questions. And so I tackled a bunch of them on Friday, and then let's hit one today. What will Christian Wood's role be next season? And I started to go through, well, he's going to start off the bench. All right, who have been the most successful big men off the bench the last couple of years? So I just went through the last 5 years. Here are big men. Here are just some examples of big men that average 20 minutes a game, starting less than 20 games. So they're they're coming off the bench for the most part. Montrezl Harrell is I
was literally about to think about
the biggest example. He was his 4 out of his last 5 seasons were the top 5 in win shares as far as bigs that come off the bench. So he's the most successful guy to come off to come off the bench over the last 5 years. Yeah. 4 times he's been high in win shares. The other guy that was up there in win shares was Domantas Sabonis, who came off the bench. He only started 5 games in 2018, 2019. You just forget that his rise has kind of been pretty quick here, even though we knew it was coming. But he averaged 14, 9, and 3 assists in about 25 minutes off the bench, which is just weird to think about now that Sabonis was coming off the bench like that. So you have Montrezl Harrell, who's a scoring, not going to give you anything on defense. We know what Montrezl Harrell is. We played in the playoffs 2 years. We know
kind of similar to
a little similar to Christian Wood, but Christian Wood's skill set is different.
Yeah.
Domantas Sabonis, Christian Wood is not Domantas Sabonis. Like you can't compare him. The other two guys that stood out to me were Mitchell Robinson in two different years with the Knicks. He came off the bench, different skill set, but he came off the bench and had some pretty successful runs there with the Knicks. And then Chris Boucher for the Raptors. That one was an interesting one where he's coming off the bench and had some pretty successful years. But the thing is, there's only like 7 or 8 guys over the last 5 years that are bigs that came off the bench for the most part that average 15 points a game. It's just really, really hard.
Yeah. But if there's somebody that can do it, it's Christian Wood because of his skill set and the size and what he. This feels weird saying peak Christian Wood. Would, there's a lot of talent there. Like, somebody, he's looking for a drop.
Casual.
The button got stuck.
Somebody, after we did our questions last week, one of our pods last week, we talked about like closing lineups and stuff. Somebody tweeted at me, is like, oh my gosh, Isaac's disrespecting Christian Wood. He's sleeping on him, like all this stuff. I'm like, no. I'm not. I literally had Christian Wood as my third leading scorer for the team next year.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, let's just wait. Like they didn't make a big investment in him. I don't think he's the second best player on the team. Like they literally said when they traded for him, it's a prove it scenario for him and the team to him. Like this isn't when the news first came out that Christian Wood's going to come off the bench, a portion of fans were like, this is how we're starting off this relationship. Like, this is a great start. And it's like, what? Like, we haven't committed to anything to it. Like, we literally got him for the 26th overall pick in the draft. It is a prove it scenario. Like, he's only been good for a couple of years and he's bounced around a couple teams here. So, like, in the past couple of years, more teams before that, but I don't really count some of that.
We've seen guys in the NBA, like the first one that popped in my head was like Tyreek Evans, who put up insane numbers for the Kings and then just couldn't play anywhere else, right? Like there have been guys that are just good stats, bad team type players. I don't think Christian Wood is that guy, especially he's going to be able to play next to Luka, and I think he's going to make him a lot better. But yeah, there have been guys in the past that just like it doesn't work when there's actual real stakes involved, and I think Christian Wood wants to prove that. He said win a million times in his interviews.
Yeah, and I'll be curious, it's a whole different coaching staff, whole different regime kind of from the first time he came through Dallas, but you got a little glimpse into what they thought about him whenever Mike Shedd was a guest on the pod. He dropped a subtle little line, go back and listen to that, about Christian Wood back then and kind of his mindset back then of, playing the game of basketball and stuff. So it's like, all right, how is he different now? How is this a prove it scenario? It's a prove it for everybody. We know what he looked like when he's good, like when he played with Houston last year, averaging 21 a game, even, or 2 years ago. And then last year averaging 18 and 10 a game. So like, all right, we know you can get some boards. We know you can score. Now let's see what you look like on a good team. Like you did that on a bad team. Let's see what it looks like on a good team with a little bit more defined role. You're playing with a superstar in Luka.
Yep.
But if it all clicks, he's one of the guys that raises the ceiling of this team to where 6'10" with some of the things he can do. But I also realize at the same time, there's a floor to this too. Like if you're telling me it flames out and it's not working out and they're looking for a trade partner in 3 months, I'm not shocked. If you're telling me he's the third leading scorer on the team, averaging, 16 to 18 points and lighting it up and challenging, and we're having conversations, why isn't he starting over JaVale McGee?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked either. So it's just a wide range,
I'm more on the higher end than you are of this. I think it's still Jason Kidd's pushing him along in these rungs. And I think that I think they have to. I think Christian Wood will have a rising role. Like his role will rise as the season goes along. It will not. This is a much better approach, I think, than what they did with Porzingis. Now Porzingis came in; he had already been an All-Star and that, but he had only been pretty good for like 3 seasons or so. And so he comes in the All-Star. He was hurt after that year, after that All-Star appearance. And so that he comes in and he's given the max right away. Like no questions asked, nothing at all. And they're like, all right, we're putting everything in. We're trading multiple firsts. We're trading Dennis. We're putting all of this in. We're taking on contracts. We're giving everything, putting it all in. We're putting all our chips in this Kristaps Porzingis basket. This, with Christian Wood, is a much better approach to what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're taking it way more safe this time. They're like, all right, you'll come in here. You got to prove it to us. We got to prove it to you. And guess what? You're not even going to start to begin with. Like, let's just start there. Let's figure out how you can play on a winning team, because we already got this worked. We think we can just replace JaVale McGee, who already knows all of our principles, with Dwight Powell, and the rest of our rotation will just be the same, except for Jalen Brunson, and we're just going to be fine, because we already have proven we can do this in the playoffs. You got to prove to us now. And he's saying the same thing about the Mavericks, is you got to prove to me, and blah, blah, blah. But I think that's a much better approach than what they did with Porzingis, and I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Oh, I love this approach. Like, I would be much more worried if that first presser, when Nico comes out and he hands us the strawberries,
this is our guy.
And they're forever, and he sits there and he says, "This is the perfect pairing with Luka Doncic.
Yeah.
Like, he's our starting five. He's going to help us get back to the playoffs and play a huge role." Like, that would worry me, because once again, it's not a huge like diss to him, but it's like he's only had a couple of good seasons. And then we haven't even mentioned the whole like locker room stuff, all different like reports, different stuff. So it's like, all right, it's a prove it thing. They know it. He knows it. And because of that, and because of all of that, I'm just trying to temper the expectations. I think it's a dangerous game to go into this season, considering the whole situation and the fact that we're even getting a glimpse into the situation from Dallas's side. And we're like, some of us are still having this, dude, he's going to be an all-star next year. I'm like, all right, let's just, I think when you look at the range of outcomes for players on this Mavs team, I'm really confident where Luka is. Like, I think it doesn't change much. Dorian, Reggie,
a lot of knowns on this team. Yeah, we talked about that.
JaVale, there's not huge question marks. Christian Wood is just like, the chain, like what that could be is, it's very,
Let us know in the comment section below. What do you think Christian Wood's role will be next season? What do you think? What do you think his outcome is going to be? Like the range of outcomes for Christian Wood is big. So let us know, guys. Thanks for listening to Locked On Mavs. We will be back tomorrow. We're going to tier up. We're going to rank some more stuff in the NBA. We've been ranking backcourts. We ranked supporting cast, number one options. We're going to rank something else tomorrow, and then we'll continue covering Eurobasket. We'll cover Eurobasket starting Thursday. We will have an episode around Thursday night, Thursday afternoon, maybe to cover that.
I get my scarf out.
First Slovenia. Oh, I got mine right here too. We'll cover Slovenia, and we'll cover them all throughout Eurobasket. So we'll have that all for you guys. Now go listen to Locked On NBA. Jackson Gatlin, great stuff, doing 3 interviews. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom, me Slovenci.